I love this stuff. I hope you guys too. I'm just fired up. Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Friends, thank you for joining us. As a broker and investor, I like to stay in the loop with what's going on in the real estate community in Canada, in Ontario, in Toronto. But today we're talking federal election. In less than 1 month, you're going to cast your ballot to determine who is going to lead our country going into the next several years. And so I thought it was important and appropriate to go through some of the platforms for my favorite topic, real estate. The determination for me in this election is riding very heavily on the platforms that these candidates have on how they're going to address the issues with real estate. That's why I wanted to put this episode together for you. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe to our show. And if you're getting value or you've learned some stuff and you want to start the dialogue on the different platforms and how candidates are addressing these concerns, please share this on Instagram. You can tag us at Watson Estates. I do believe that elections are not for everyone. If you don't educate yourself on what the candidates stand for, I really don't feel it's appropriate for you to vote. But instead, I would rather that you take the duty to learn as a Canadian what these candidates stand for and then vote accordingly. Nobody can hold a grudge against you in that case. But I was really waiting for the Liberals to come out with their platform, and they just did. So now we have the platforms for the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals. And I'm going to share all of those with you. So hopefully you can come to a decision on who you're going to vote for. Also, I'm going to try as best I can to I'm going to have an opinion. That's just the way I am. But I'm going to try not to choose any particular party. Instead, I want to highlight some of the good things, some of the bad things, some of the critiques on each of the parties and allow you to decide. We're going to start off today with a CBC.ca article that reads, main federal parties all say they'll make housing more affordable. Here's what we know about their plans. Here's what it says. Canadian voters will be hearing a similar message. We still got time, by the way. We're going to continue to hear more, and these programs will evolve based on some of the criticisms, I believe, and some of the questions that we ask. That's why I believe it's important. If you want in the comments below, we got to ask these questions. If you see holes in the plans, point them out. Well, they say housing has grown too expensive. This is across the board. All of the different parties say that, and they all claim to have a plan to fix it. Then, again, it's up to you to decide which plan you feel will fix it. Hopefully, by following our show, you've got some idea of some of the major issues that are going on in our country. But they say this, quote, it doesn't really matter where you fit on the housing spectrum. Housing is in a state of crisis in this country. That was Jeff Morrison, Executive Director of the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. So if you're unsure who to vote for, listen up. I mean, we're solid in our house. Voting results are actually already in. My wife will remain in charge for the next 4 years. But at a federal level, let's talk about NDP. Start off with the NDP. And these guys had their plans out a few days ago. Liberals were the last to come out. I wonder if they maybe copy and pasted some of these things, but whatever. NDP. NDP's housing platform is centered on a proposal to build 500,000 affordable homes over the next 10 years. I remember when the Liberals were elected, this was a big idea, right? These are the number of homes we're going to have. And I can't remember the exact total, but that was the idea, is over the next 10 years, this housing strategy, this housing plan. Well, that continues under an NDP leadership. I also saw a Yahoo article that goes deeper. NDP outlines a plan to make Canadian real estate more affordable. Quote, every day I hear from young people and their parents who worry they will never be able to afford to own a decent home. That's everybody's beloved NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, saying that, quote, they can barely afford to pay rent, let alone compete against big money investors in the housing market. We see that. Justin Trudeau will keep protecting the interests of the ultra rich, but I'm ready to make the dream of owning a home a reality for Canadian families. Do we go all the way left on the spectrum and vote NDP? Well, here's some of the other things they want to do. The party's also proposing a 20% foreign buyers tax on the sale of individuals who are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Just to put that into perspective, that is a huge jump from the Liberals' current plan, which is set to roll out in January 2022, of 1%. We're going to bump that number up to 20%. The question that I have in this case is, do they need to be vacant? Because that's the current way it's set up, which I think is a massive loophole, because if they're not vacant, then this Canadian citizenship and permanent residence thing goes out the window. But again, what they're looking to do is take the plan that the Liberals have already shown and blow it 20-fold. Well, the NDP say it also plans to include targeting money laundering. Money laundering actually seems to be a common thread through a lot of these campaign promises, Well, they're saying they want to make it harder to hide behind nameless companies, giving regulators more teeth. And the party's platform did not detail the measures it would use to achieve those aims, but we're going to do it. Damn if we do it. Well, number 3, what I think is probably one of the most significant out of these, or that separates them from some of the other parties, is to help buyers get into the market. The party is proposing the creation of a 30-year mortgages insured by the CMHC. So we want 30-year mortgages. This was very much a plan. I believe it was at the Ontario PC level. That was one of the conversations was extending. That was a conservative plan. And here we have the NDP talking about that. Obviously, the consequence being that we have a greater level of affordability. People can buy homes, but also with higher demand, it's kind of like a first-time home buyer rebate, right? You help people get in that otherwise couldn't. It actually is great for investors because you can get higher cash flow on a monthly basis, but naturally makes, just like bringing interest rates down, we're spreading interest rates out. We're delaying the need to pay that principal back. And so therefore demand goes up, which obviously is going to increase prices. We need to have this steady balance between demand and supply. Well, there you go. That absolutely boosts the demand, but we got to make sure we have somebody addressing supply. Well, here's what they have to say. The NDP stand quite heavily on rentals. The NDP government they want to streamline funding applications for co-ops, social and nonprofit housing while waiving the federal portion of the GST HST on the construction of new affordable rental units in order to boost supply. So beyond the 500,000 they want in supply across Canada over the next 10 years, they also want supply of rentals, which I think is noble. Absolutely noble. They say it would free up federal lands for these sorts of projects, turning unused and underused properties into, quote, vibrant new communities. So there you have it. That's the NDP's plan. And as we go through these, I think we're going to see some overlap. Absolutely, there's going to be some overlap. But I think the big looming question for us is, how big a change do we want? How big a crisis is this? And you'll see that some parties have absolutely more as far as promises, more as far as shaking the boat than others. So we're going to move into conservatives, the guys that are probably least happy about having this election. You know what? No, I'd give that title to the NDP probably. But conservatives, right? They're second party trying to make this big comeback. Maybe caught a little flat-footed as far as their leadership, but I've actually spoken to a lot of people who are in the landlord associations, and they very much love the plan of the Conservatives. So let's hear what it is. The Conservatives' election platform features a plan to build 1 million homes over 3 years. So we're not talking 500 over 10. We're talking 1 million over 3 years, a serious attack on supply. The conversion of at least 15% of federal government property into housing, and the creation of an Indigenous housing strategy. The Indigenous housing strategy we'll get to a little bit more down later in the show. But this idea of taking federal government land and converting it into private is very much a conservative move, right? We can do more with that land than you just leaving it flat there. That's one of the easy, low-hanging fruits as far as getting land and opportunities to build. And that's exactly the strategy the Conservative Party is taking. Well, the Conservative Party of Canada also says it will tackle money laundering. Trudeau said the Conservatives will, quote, do what they always do, give the biggest breaks to the wealthiest few. This is the criticism from the Liberal government to the Conservatives, a reference to O'Toole's platform commitment to, listen to this, create incentives for Canadians who invest in rental housing by making tweaks to the capital gains tax regime. So this idea of helping the investor with obviously the promise of boosting rental supply. How we do it is obviously different. Do we give tax breaks or do we do it like, it's really funny to see the NDP giving the tax breaks for subsidized housing on the one side, but then we get mad and they seem to be conflicting, but really you're getting tax breaks to the capital gains tax. In both cases, there's tax breaks. They're all trying to solve the same problem, which is supply. Which one works better? I mean, that's up to you to decide. But I do think that that's a new and a smart idea, this incentive for the capital gains tax, especially for landlords, which is why I believe these associations are happy to see that as part of their plan. Also, the Conservative government plan on they're going to bar foreign investors who are not living or moving to Canada from buying a home for at least the next 2 years. So instead of taking a 1% tax of non-residents and people who are not Canadian citizens and boosting that up to 20%, we're just going to say, cut it. No more. No more buying unless you're moving to Canada for the next 2 years. That's the plan coming out of the Conservative government. It would function the same, in my opinion, as a 20%, but it's like the NDP, but shorter. So after the 2 years, we'd have to reassess and kind of move it forward, it sounds like. But they're actually calling it quite a loophole from the NDP side, saying that doesn't really work. Maybe it's an explanation why they boosted the number up to 20 rather than cut it all together. They say, quote, in other words, a foreign speculator can get around the ban by pretending they plan to move in Canada at some point in the future without providing any detail or timelines. O'Toole's plan is unenforceable and won't do anything to tackle foreign real estate speculation. Hopefully the critiques allow them to kind of think through some of these plans, but there's the criticism that lies with that one. Number 3, the party also wants to encourage the offering of 7 to 10 year mortgages. Instead of your typical 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year, we're also going to be able to extend it to 7 and 10 year terms. Well, to make tweaks to the stress test, they also want to do, and they want insurance requirements to help people they want to ease the mortgage, these insurance requirements to help people qualify easier for financing. So similar to what we talked about in the NDP, we're making it easier instead of stretching out to a 30 year. It's funny. It seems to be just repackaged. It's the same stuff, packaged differently. We want renewals. We want easier qualification. And in this case, we want 7 to 10 year renewals. In the other case, we want 30-year amortization. The 30-year amortization, I feel like, would help from a cash flow perspective better. But the 7 to 10 year allows you to absolutely lock in these low rates. It kind of comes with maybe an expectation that rates would go up. But in either case, you're boosting demand, no? That's what you're doing. You're boosting the demand. I think the average mortgage breaks around 3 years anyway. So you could even say 7 to 10 years. Is that actually going to be the case when we know Canadians typically move in 5 or less years? Anyways, it is a demand booster and it would absolutely increase prices for everybody. It's not like it's specific to any one group of people. Then we've got the Liberals, which is the plan I'm so glad we waited for, because you want to talk about shaking things up. The Liberals are absolutely doing it. Here we go, guys. Just take a breath. Take a little breath of fresh air here. We're going in. CBC.ca. Trudeau promises new incentives worth billions and a tax on flipping to help Canadians buy a home. These guys got a lot of plans, but they break it into 3 points. It's a 3-point plan. You know, Trudeau, he likes his numbers. He got a 3-point plan. Quote, it's going to unlock home ownership through, number 1, new government funding. Government loves to spend money. 2, a plan to build more homes to address supply constraints. And 3, measures to establish and protect new rights for buyers, which is really the doozy. You'll see that one in a minute. But here's the plan. Okay, so we're gonna talk about helping demand. Well, if the Liberals are reelected September 20th, Trudeau would introduce, this is brand new. I like new things because we don't talk about it, comes out of left field. This is the stuff that makes my job fun. Because then we can learn about it and we can get ahead. Maybe there's opportunities in here. They want to introduce a first home savings account, which would allow Canadians up to the age of 40, because apparently you should own your home by 40, to save $40,000 toward their first home and withdraw it tax-free when it comes time to buy it. So listen to this. Money added into the account goes in tax-free and will be withdrawn without any taxes owing. So it's kind of like a TFSA, but the way that I read that is it sounds like it's actually like an RRSP TFSA, maybe the best of both worlds. And so if you can save up to age 40, to the age 40, it makes me wonder, should I not be putting $40,000 for each of my kids aside now? Obviously, that's not something every Canadian can do. Naturally, it's going to benefit those who have access to those funds. But maybe, I'll put $40,000 in investments towards the first property for my 1-year-old and my 3-year-old, and maybe they'll be able to buy in Toronto after all. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. Another idea that they have is they want to double the first-time homebuyer tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000. We talked about this. Obviously, it's going to boost demand. Even if it's kind of preferential treatment for the first-time homebuyer, naturally, it's going to increase that buying power at the low end. It's going to boost the low-end prices of homes. Going to continue the same cycle that we've been in of making it more and more unattainable to get into the market at the beginning. Excuse me. Number 3. They want to force the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to slash mortgage interest rates by 25%. That's a $6,100 savings for the average person. Why we're covering that insurance for them is beyond me. But if we can cut it back by 25%, sure. At least it's some progress. What I'm noticing a lot in this Liberal plan is there is some progress that's being made. They're shaking things up. Is it going to work like a science? Not necessarily. But it reminds me of what happened in 2017 when we added the stress test. Even if it did nothing, which I believe it did nothing, it was enough of a shakeup to shake the market and put things into perspective and slow things down for the couple years that followed. And I believe that these things have that same potential. It's also why I believe we're maybe starting to see a shift in perspective that the government has for real estate. Up until this point, government has been very pro real estate prices. And I believe the NDP, the conservative in some ways, definitely conservative, show they want that to move forward. Whereas the liberals are saying we are going to freak the hell out of Canadians in order to fix this market. But you can't just have the buying side, the demand side. You also need the supply side. When they're dealing with that too. They want to build, preserve, or repair 1.4 million homes in the next 4 years by giving cities, quote, new tools to speed up housing construction. God, that'd be nice. They'd create $4 billion pool of cash that cities could tap if they help to create the, quote, middle-class home. So if you're dealing with this type of home, I'd rather hear a missing middle instead of middle class, but middle class, everyone thinks they're in the middle class, right? That's just the way it is. Actually, people tend to lean themselves into the upper class, upper middle. But anyways, the party believes this program, which would crack down on speculators owning vacant land, would make tens of thousands of new homes available in 4 years. This program. So again, we're trying to boost supply, keep the numbers going. Obviously, the Liberals had a pretty strong plan for housing, and there's actually been many modular homes coming on, and hopefully that kind of continues. But they want to build on that. Of course, with a campaign comes campaign promises. Now's the time to spend if we haven't done enough already. They're promising $2.7 billion over 4 years to build or repair more affordable homes, money to convert empty office space into housing. See, interesting. Don't you find this interesting? These are things we talk about on the show. Like, thank you. We're at least having these kind of conversations. Is that the right idea? I don't know, but at least it's something that's on the table. They want a multi-generational home renovation tax credit. Let's make the contractors work a little bit harder because they're not busy enough to offset the cost of adding a secondary unit in the home, and more money for Indigenous communities. So what's interesting to me with the second unit in the home is there's a lot of promises at the city level. You don't hear a lot about it at the federal level, but there's a lot of promises at the city level of converting actual already established basement apartments into legal units. Like they don't want the illegal status of the unit, but there's very few programs that talk about actually being involved in converting the program. Now with this that they're not talking about is you're going to have your hands tied to CMHC rental rates, and it's probably not going to be worth for a serious investor to do anyways, but for someone who's just kind of doesn't have the money and wants to build a second suite and is okay with selling their soul, maybe there's an opportunity in there. And this is all kind of, again, maybe not the best thing, but it's ideas. And I think we could use some ideas, no? Well, number 3, matching a promise made by the Conservative Liberal government would also ban foreign ownership of Canadian homes for the next 2 years. So one of the big programs that the Conservatives had is actually also included. And that's why I think they maybe copy pasted a little bit, but that's all right. Number 4, expand the upcoming tax on vacant homes owned by non-residents and non-Canadians to include foreign-owned vacant land in large urban areas. So they want to expand the vacant tax thing they've already got coming in place. They want to impose a, quote, anti-flipping tax on residential properties, which would require the property either to be held for at least 12 months or face burdensome taxes. In Ontario, 12 months is not that big a deal. It's not like we can flip a home in 6 to 9 months. I think that actually will apply more to some of these Western provinces and in the East. Like we've got a lot of provinces where you can actually do a full BRRRRs, whole apartments in 6 to 9 months. But then again, a lot of these investors aren't flipping anymore anyways. It's not really the best market for flips. A lot of people are actually leaning more to the buy and the hold. But anyways, again, I like that there's some attitude for change. That's what I like. But nothing compares to this last one, guys. Buckle your seatbelt. They call it total price transparency. Oh, guys. This one paragraph I've highlighted. So I like to highlight what I'm going to read, but then I highlight the key points. The whole thing is almost completely highlighted for key points. Here we go. A new federal homebuyer bill of rights would ban blind bidding. Ban blind bidding. Home buyers vying for the same property without knowing how much others are offering. It would establish a legal right to a home inspection. It would ensure total price transparency so that would-be buyers know the history of the recent home sales prices. So you got to have an education. You got to be educated, and you got to be able to get access to this inspection and require more disclosure. What does that mean? What does that mean? From real estate agents who represent both buyers and sellers, so probably multiple representation, and demand, listen to this, banks offer mortgage deferrals for 6 months to someone who's lost their job. So if you lose your job, you know that mortgage deferral that we all enjoyed last year? Well, you're going to get that as part of the terms of your mortgage. Wow, what a thick paragraph. A paragraph thick. Well, much of what the Liberals propose in this Bill of Rights falls outside the traditional limits of federal responsibility. Well, this is maybe the problem. According to the Constitutional Division of Powers, property and civil rights and, quote, all matters of a merely local or private nature are considered provincial jurisdiction. So with this promise, and the big one here is the blind bidding war. Having things be completely transparent, showing competing offer prices. That's not the job of the federal government to determine. Well, Trudeau says, well, it can be if we make it fall under the criminal code. And that's exactly what they're doing. So interesting. Well, here's his response. This is Trudeau's response to the move. I love this stuff. I hope you guys too. I'm just fired up. Okay, here we go. Here's his response. Quote, let's remember, in 2017, as we launched that national housing strategy, we were starting from a standing start because for the previous 10 years, a conservative government decided the federal government had no role to play in housing. That's wrong, Trudeau said, but absolutely there is more to do, much more to do. Trudeau believes it's the federal level's responsibility to address housing. And they have since they began in 2017. And in that sense, sure, conservatives weren't as involved in dealing with housing, but also prices have grown in ways unseen in Canadian history since they were elected in 2017. Not to put the conservatives in the spotlight, not to say they did great. They really didn't, because we also saw rapid price appreciation through bidding wars leading up to 2017, which was fixed in some sense by the Liberals. But since then, the amount of federal spending coming from the Liberals is the reason the drop in interest rate, these decisions made at a national level were really the ones I believe that have taken us back to the same points, the same issues that we saw back then. So, I mean, you choose on which way you want, but they believe it's their responsibility to deal with housing at a federal level. When we're dealing with affordable housing, we've seen, at least I've noticed, at the lower, when you're dealing with unaffordable homes or, very entry level homes, those have tried to be tackled by the municipal levels and they simply can't. So it gets bumped up to the provincial level, who also struggles, gets bumped up from the federal level. And I think he's maybe taking that same approach as it relates to home ownership. But anyways, let me know what you think. If this is the change that we need, I mean, we can why not do a little poll ourselves? I recently took a poll and I found out 100% of campers were angry when their tent collapsed. Maybe we'll get a little bit more optimism this time around. Okay, here we go. So who is in opposition to the Liberal plan? Who's pissed? Who's pissed about this ban on bidding wars? A lot of people, especially our friends, the real estate industry. They love it. The Canadian Real Estate Association, which represents 135,000 real estate agents, was quick to criticize the Liberal plan. They took a stance on that proposal. The group said it amounts to, quote, criminalizing the way Canadians sell their home. Here's what they say. Canadians have the right to choose how they want to transact. What is likely the largest purchase of their lives? Well, the sellers. Let's be clear here, because their option wasn't made available to the buyers. But the proposed banning of blind bidding removes the ability for Canadian homeowners to sell their home the way they want. Let me ask you, as a Canadian, do you want bidding wars? Is that the way you want to see our market transact? I guess we'll see at the polls, guys. I think we'll see at the polls, but it's interesting that you have this lobby group, the Canadian Real Estate Association, the Ontario Real Estate Association, and the Toronto Real Estate Board, and many other boards across the country and whatever. These guys are all taking a stance, and none bigger than the Ontario Real Estate Association right now. Here's what they had. The article is a better dwelling article, which, I mean, if you want the best headlines, that's the place to go. It was one of Canada's largest real estate lobbies lost their SH*T over an election promise. Here's what their post was on Twitter. And we got an email about this too. I can't remember if the email was from Treb or Rhea, but it doesn't matter. It's consistent. The Liberal Party housing plan criminalized the ability of hardworking Canadians to choose how to sell their homes by regulating home selling practices through the criminal code. Homeowners deserve choice, not house arrest. Liberals' housing plan gives new meaning to house arrest. So the Ontario Real Estate Association alleges the party believes homes, quote, should be done entirely through auctions. So they're saying the reason you're doing this is you want this to be like Australia. You just want auctions. That's what you want, because that's a bad thing. And to AREA, it is. They say auction fever creates a 3-ring circus on front lawns as hopeful buyers crowd in front of a home with a live auctioneer or online, which would remove that whole circus, no? And bidding begins. Sounds fun, but not exactly what the proposal is, which would more than likely go to the industry for polishing first. We're trying to get the ball rolling, and the Liberals are the only ones willing to do it. They'll stick their neck on the line because I think they're coming from a pretty healthy and comfortable position at the polls. Maybe that's why. Maybe you don't see the other parties doing it, but I mean, they're loving the hate that's coming at them. The other hate that's coming at the Liberals right now is from the Indigenous housing community. So the people, so apparently, as it relates to Indigenous housing and the Indigenous people, 1 out of every 15 Indigenous people have been reported to have experienced homelessness in their lives, compared with 1 out of every 128 in Canada's general population. And unlike the general population, Indigenous people are also more likely to rent rather than own a home. So this Indigenous conversation is taking place right now. They talked to Margaret PFOH. I don't know how to say that. We'll say Fo. I apologize for the ignorance, but she's a CEO of the Aboriginal Housing Management Association. She expressed disappointment that the Liberal government did not create an Indigenous housing plan, which both the Conservatives and the NDP have pledged to do. So hopefully I really was hoping to come at this podcast with some kind of neutrality, criticize everybody, push forward the plans of everybody. It's very interesting for me to see just how much is being put forward by the Liberal government, given that they're feeling rather confident. Maybe the confidence is what's steering these things. But let me know what you think about the different platforms. Which one do you think is going to work best for you? And if you're feeling so bold, you can even tell us who you're voting for or who you support and what plans you like. And will they follow through, right? Will they follow through on these plans? That's the other thing. Or are they all just, pole dancing? If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our show. If you learned some stuff and if there's benefit in here for you, your friends, your colleagues, please share it on Instagram. Tag me at Watson Estates, and I'll send you a little message as a thank you. Really appreciate all the time, and we'll see you next time. Take care and keep it real.